We're here talking to Jake Wood-Evans at his exhibition Relic in the Winchester Discovery Centre. Can you tell us a bit about where you derived the inspiration for your works? I know there's a lot of baroque influence in them.
My first interest in the baroque was probably just after university, where I spent some time at the Prado. These pieces were more based on altarpieces, so looking at the Murillo, the Rubens, and that's why the canvases are arched really at the top to sort of give that sense of that kind of imagery. I felt like it allowed me to be more abstract with the reference material, because there's something straight away with that shape that sort of start off by putting the main structure of the reference, like this one behind me, the Assumption of the Virgin after Rubens. I sort of put the structure in and then start taking it away.
So you'll have a copy of the original work that you're basing it on
Yeah.
in front of you. And when you say you put it in, are you using pencil or are you
Yeah, I sort of break up the canvas, marking the areas, block it in, and then once I've got to a certain point, in my earlier work I used to go a lot further with the sort of the more figurative painting, putting in more details. With these I've been a bit looser, and mainly it's just the sort of the structure, almost like trying to create like a trace, almost like you know, the sort of X-rays they do of paintings, where you see the surface underneath the top layer, and kind of thinking about that.
So when you're taking the paint away, how are you doing that? Is it a cloth?
Yeah, well, these were all made quite quickly, so the paint was still wet, so I was kind of wiping off, scraping off, and just pulling it around really and seeing where it goes, and the kind of accidents that happen, the sort of surprises along the way, then inform the next steps of the painting. So it's in my mind, to begin with, I have a sort of idea of sort of how they're going to turn out, but I have to kind of abandon that fairly early on and just see where they end up, because especially with the linseed oil and the turps that I was putting in, the paint was kind of going all over the place, and so it's kind of, I find that part of the process really interesting. Yeah. The unpredictability of the materials that then kind of take you off on a tangent, and rather than being too rigid and, you know, formulaic, I like to see where that takes me. Rather than just telling someone something, it's more of a kind of conversation with the viewer, where you kind of, you know, you kind of take part in the experience as well, because everybody's got their own narrative that they bring to the work. So I kind of really want to have that as part of the viewing process.
It must be quite a physical experience actually making them. It looks like it is.
Yeah, there is a sort of I guess a bit of a toing and froing, but so that kind of taking away the thrill of that, like losing something that you've spent a bit of time putting in, and playing around with that is the most exciting part of the process.
So are you working always just on one painting at a time, or will you be doing multiples? Yeah,
I pretty much, how I like to do it is each painting kind of almost informs the next one. This whole body of work was in my studio, and I was kind of working on them at different levels, and one or two of them would turn out well, and almost they'd capture something that I wanted the show to be about, and then I'd be like, okay, I really like how that's you know, played out in that painting, and you know, if I can bring some of that to these paintings, and then you get that kind of relationship of the kind of the paintings working together as a whole, rather than just, you know, one individual piece. And I like creating bodies of work, because you get that you get something that happens where the paintings start speaking to each other as well. With this show especially, I think it's more powerful. You kind of go into like an atmosphere of the type of painting, sort of set the tone of the atmosphere almost. And with these arch canvases, it does feel more religious in here, which is quite It's sort of obvious, I suppose, if you're going to be referencing that imagery.
At what point did the title of the show, so Relic, come along?
With my paintings, I've always been interested in the idea of them being kind of damaged or, you know, faded or, you know, found hundreds of years in the future or something like that. I felt like it seemed to fit this show, and it also kind of alludes to the time. Old paintings that are kept in these huge museums. There's something about the idea of what they'll be like in hundreds of years' time. They keep getting touched up by restorers, whether they'll still be, you know, arguably some of them aren't the same paintings now. So, yeah, I don't know, I always think about that. Yeah, I think this probably displays more of the layers that have been sort of rubbed away, and layers that are kind of, you know, barely there.
Do you think you spend more time putting in the original, the initial material, or then subtracting from that?
Well, I feel like it always takes longer to put in the original material, but then I think that gives the taking away, you know, if you're not being contrived about it and being careful. I don't think you can ever make a sort of successful painting really unless you are bold and commit to the action of taking away and risking something, and then that can be seen on the surface, and I think that really adds you know, kind of gives you what you want, rather than a kind of half like trying to tinker away. And so there's always that risk there, basically. You know, you put in that time, you spent the day plotting it in, and then you could potentially just rub it away in you know, 10 seconds.